I'm here to introduce Pamela Vickers from, let me get this right, Big Nerd Ranch. And she's here to talk about our company culture being awesome, or is that just a lie? So without further ado, Pamela, take it away. Thanks.
All right, can you hear me okay? I'm trying to find the right place to clip it. In the back, looks good. So thanks for coming out. I know this is the last session of the day, aside from the keynote. I have good news. My talk's on the shorter side, so if you are trying to get to the keynote, you should be able to get a great seat. Or if you're trying to get to the bar, you should get an even better seat. So anyway, so like you said, I'm Pamela Vickers, and I'm talking about company culture today. So company culture has become a ubiquitous phrase in our industry, and it can be used to reference anything from having flexible hours to being able to shoot Nerf guns at coworkers. But what's essentially a description for the values and personality of a company is now being listed under perks and benefits on many job listings. It's become a commodity that's handed to a new hire. Here you go. It's a buzzword. It's become a commodity. It's a buzzword. It's lost all its true meaning. So what should it mean when we say our company culture is awesome? That the Beer Friday has great attendance, or that we work hard but play hard, or that we have supportive coworkers and well-defined systems for mitigating any squabbles. So I searched for the keyword culture on the job listings on Stack Overflow and GitHub, and really I might as well just search for the word job, because almost every job listing mentioned our great company culture. But very few actually said what that culture meant to them at that company. Most of them left it as an exercise to the reader. But let's read some. To succeed, you must be passionate about Acme Co., keep up with our daily release cycles, and maintain our useful, funny, cool culture during times of immense growth. It also doesn't hurt to impress us with your technical chops. And that was the last mention of culture in the entire listing. Our unique culture deploys a highly integrated model where traders, quantitative analysts, equity analysts, and technologists work closely together to capitalize on pricing opportunities in the options, commodities, and futures market. Yeah, I have no idea what that one means. Please check out our culture and process dev blog post to get a feeling for the Acme Co experience. But don't trust us when we say we have the best culture in town. Drop by Friday after work for a craft brew and try to whip our CTO in ping pong. So I visited their blog post. Wow, the day has flown by. You've finished 2 stories, your pull requests were peer-reviewed and merged, and now it's time to kick back. Pull up a stool next to our keg and pour yourself a craft brew, or grab a seat in front of our huge TVs for some intense Call of Duty. Tomorrow, we'll wrap up the current sprint and hold a science fair to demonstrate the new hotness we've built. We hope you've enjoyed day index 0. It only gets better from here. So the best culture in town sounds a lot like, we've brought together a talented team that's down-to-earth, friendly, and driven to build products that people use and love. We have flexible hours, sponsored company events, and a sweet ping pong table. Game on. Which reminds me, company culture isn't something you can get overnight. It usually takes about a week to ship that ping pong table. So ping pong table jokes aside, some of the job listings were just strange. We're looking for an experienced and awesome iOS developer, someone who puts the WTF in apps. Again, no idea. And some are using awesome company culture just to land hits without having any redeeming bullet points and having some actually pretty terrible bullet points nested deeper. Ability to work extended hours as needed, including some evenings and weekends, and to be on call for emergencies, required. So fortunately, some of the companies seem to get it a little bit more. What we value. We don't care about ninjas or rock stars. We look for people who are really smart, really nice, and who want to solve big problems and have the freedom to solve them without slogging through layers of bureaucracy. We believe in code quality, testing, peer reviews, collaboration. We like polyglot programming. We believe in using the best tools for the job. We love open source, open communication, and have created an environment where we treat people like adults. We value building the right team and love that people rarely leave us. Yeah, oh, it's so dark. Is Doctor Who giving a thumbs up? Because it's awesome. Okay, so one more good one. At Acme Co., we respect and value our employees, and we promote a fun and supportive culture. We invest in your future with unrivaled professional development, and we provide challenging and dynamic projects that are collaborative and engaging. All of this happens within a 40-hour work week to keep your work and play balanced. We know that happy developers write the best code, and our employees are the best in the business. Yeah, okay. So assuming that great or awesome or even best in town company culture is one that produces happy developers and employees that produce quality work, let's investigate what a company culture should strive to be and examine along the way what can detract and distract from those long-term goals, all in the name of great culture. At Ruby Midwest in 2013, developer and speaker Ernie Miller gave a really great talk called The Most Important Optimization, Happiness. And in it, he introduces Martin Seligman's model for happiness called PERMA. PERMA breaks down happiness into 5 elements: positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. Now, perhaps there are other elements in your life preventing you from achieving happiness, but real life aside, is it reasonable to expect your company to attempt to mark a tick for each of the PERMA elements? I say yes, and that a company must in order to really call their culture great. So how can company culture satisfy this model? Let's take a look at each letter. Perhaps the most visible element is often P, positive emotion. Emotion is what fuels tweets and blog posts about how much someone loves or hates a company. So when a company can spark some brand love and loyalty, they often reap immediate benefits. But what elicits positive emotion? Well, lately it seems to be free t-shirts, beer Fridays or beer always, office scooters, artisan coffee, dog-friendly offices, Nerf guns, and more than anything else, of course, one more ping pong gift. There are many angles to the positive emotion element, and an interesting and perhaps controversial article in the publication Model View Culture by Melissa Santos and Rafa Colburn called How Perks Can Divide Us. It discusses how perks can divide us. So you might be thinking, really? And you won't be alone in being incredulous, but let's just take a very quick look. So t-shirts, and so first of all, and I'm sure all of the ladies in the room will agree, unisex t-shirts are a lie. Secondly, which isn't to say that the all things open t-shirts aren't awesome. Anyway, secondly, when sizing becomes an issue, sometimes embarrassment and frustration can occur, but often in private, and those making decisions will never hear about it or know. Beer. So by providing beer in the office and having lots of booze-infused team events, you might be ignoring the issues of a struggling or recovering alcoholic. And if all of the team building events and co-working events are surrounding alcohol, then this person might have to choose between being in a good professional situation and a bad personal situation. Dog-friendly offices. So this one's kind of a sore spot for me because we used to have dog-friendly offices, and I loved it. I had my dog there. That's not my dog, but it was fun. But it can be inconsiderate to people that have dog phobias, animal allergies, or just don't like dogs. So then ping pong, ha ha ha, another ping pong gift. But here we have dogs playing ping pong. So I don't know who gets that excited about ping pong. So I don't know why they're always on job listings as like the hippest office in town. So while none of these benefits are inherently bad or purposefully malicious, we should balance our assumptions that everyone's going to benefit from and appreciate these perks in the same way. When a company focuses too much on the perks it provides its employees, it might be missing more important, less tangible benefits it should be providing. Now, I'm not advocating removing these fun perks, but suggesting a shift in our focus. As an employee of a company that does have awesome fringe benefits, I know how nice it is to have them. But it's important for me to know that if all the nice coffee and food and snacks were to disappear, I'd still be happy where I am. Removing perks won't remove the problems they can mask, but shifting focus away from these perks to the heart of the company, the people, will highlight the strengths and weaknesses of the company's culture. R. Buckminster Fuller, an architect, systems theorist, author, designer, and inventor, said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change things, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So what new, non-perks-based company culture model should we build? I believe that positive emotion can directly result from having the other ERMA elements fulfilled. And that free, well-fitted t-shirts and catered lunches can just be the sweet, sweet icing on the perma cake. This is mint tea, not the biggest coffee you've ever seen. So speaking as a developer, the number one element that dictates the quality of my working life is the quality of the project I'm working on. So anyone here that suffered through a bad project or a bad client probably knows what I'm talking about. And if you don't, just consider yourself lucky. If we want to avoid bad projects, we must first figure out what makes a good project good. Fortunately, 3 pieces of the PERMA model come together very well to describe a good project. The 3 pieces are engagement, meaning, and achievement. So hopefully your company already knows that engaging work is crucial to employee happiness, and hopefully your company is already attempting to provide you with engaging work and providing the tools you need to stay engaged. When engaged, time zooms by and work moves smoothly. Oh, it's a cute little rabbit. I think it's too dark. My gifts are a loss on this, sorry. But if your day is spent finding a free tool that could be replaced with a better paid tool, you're less engaged in the project and more engaged on getting set up to work on the project. And if your day is spent in meetings, talking about a project, or chasing down client feedback or from a client or product owner, by the time you sit down to do actual work, you're just mentally done. Obstacles, no matter what form, prevent engagement. Removing friction and these procedural obstacles is a big step in making sure that good work can be done in a good way. It's also easier to stay engaged in a project when it has some meaning. Does the application solve an interesting problem, provide a helpful service, improve quality of life, or track difficult data points? If you've ever worked on an application that seemed pointless, no one is going to use this, conjuring up the required focus can be difficult, if not impossible. But if you know your application will provide something good to the world, you can often find motivation from within to struggle through the difficult parts. So once a project is in action, knowing how to create and measure successes along the way is vital to staying motivated. Having a tight feedback loop between client and developer, or project manager and developer, ensures that issues can surface early and be addressed in a timely way. Setting up a project from the start for success helps a developer hit the milestones along the way. Working under impossible deadlines can be extremely demotivating. When a developer realizes that a task might not be able to be completed within the set window of time, the developer might not really even try. Feeling like success is possible keeps you engaged in working. Despair does the opposite and breaks concentration. So good communication, available information, adequate tools, and time to complete a task all contribute to engagement and achievement. But what happens when one of these pieces breaks down? Bad communication kills engagement and can leave you distracted, waiting for an answer to a question or feedback to completed work. Bad or unavailable tools also kills engagement and can leave you battling your tools instead of working on the actual application. Impossible deadlines ruins motivation, kills engagement, therefore preventing achievement. Working in a boring domain provides no meaning, prohibiting real engagement. An ambiguous ethical domain can just have an icky meaning. You might not even want to start. And perhaps the worst, no one is going to use this, blocks all 3. No meaning, no purpose, so no engagement, and ultimately no achievement. Of course, there is no perfect project where everything is all sunshine and daisies and cotton candy. When you're a programmer, you are solving problems daily, which is inherently hard. Big Nerd Ranch's Chief Learning Officer, Aaron Hilligas, sums it up effectively in the opening of our Objective-C programming guide. The life of a programmer is mostly a never-ending struggle. Solving problems in an always changing technical landscape means that programmers are always learning new things. In this case, learning new things is a euphemism for battling against our own ignorance. If you write code, you will struggle. Most professional programmers learn to struggle hour after hour, day after day, without getting too frustrated. And that's really the key. We're going to have difficult days on the best projects. But if companies can strive from the start to provide their developers with good projects and good tools, we can mitigate some of this frustration. So what do developers want? What are projects that approach being sunshine and daisies and cotton candy? I asked my Twitter friends for 3 adjectives to describe their favorite types of projects, and I grabbed a few of them to show you. Inspirational, innovative, practical. Finite, community building, beneficial. Interesting, challenging, short. Epic, important, successful. Challenging, innovative, finite. Clear relationship between work and reward. Degree of complexity, is autonomous. So without any coaching, a trend was apparent. I received other replies that didn't follow my 3 adjective requests, but the same ideas were present there as well. We want to work on challenging, innovative projects that are well scoped and designed to succeed. To be engaged and absorbed in your work, the task at hand needs meaning, and the task needs to feel achievable. So based on this data, I propose a new formula for creating more positive emotion within your company. Engagement plus meaning yields achievement, which creates more positive emotion. In other words, without engagement and meaning, there's ultimately no achievement. And without achievement, there's much less positive emotion. And the positive emotion gained by achievement is one that can't be created by even the best cup of coffee. But what happens when a project, even after vetting, becomes unbearable? Shifting it around to other developers can turn into a game of Project Hot Potato. Sometimes when doing client work or consulting, a business relationship, like any other relationship, has to end or have an uncomfortable DTR define the relationship conversation. And sometimes the best service you can provide a client or product owner is telling them what they can't have based on the resources and time available. These can be difficult conversations, and it might even feel easier to put in the long and late hours in attempts to achieve the impossible. But managing expectations and guiding a product owner to something achievable can be the best work you can do for them. Though sometimes business relationships just don't work. This isn't to say that a business contract can be ignored or that you should rage quit your job in the middle of crunch time. But when it comes time to re-sign a client's contract or begin a new sprint on an internal project, consider these questions. Does the product owner respond to questions and/or requests in a reasonable time frame? Does the product owner respect the developing team members? Does the product owner appreciate and value the work done by the developing team? Does the product owner follow, within reason, the process outlined by the developing team? Is the product owner pleasant to work with in general? And do we, as the developers, have the resources needed to move the project forward? If and when the developing team is no longer able to move the project forward in a way that's valuable, perhaps it's time to reevaluate and advise a break in development. Whether working for a consulting company with clients or a product company with a long-running application, detecting bad project smells and knowing when and why to speak up about them is key to continued productivity and happiness. And carefully scrutinizing whether to continue or discontinue an existing project is just as important as scrutinizing new project decisions. Being vocal about what makes a good project really work can help bring more good projects your way, and both the developers and product owners can benefit from the symbiosis. And in the product company realm, if you find that no one is receptive to procedural changes or suggestions, perhaps it's time to find yourself a new client. Once you have all of the excellent project pieces in place, the final piece to the pyramid puzzle could be the trickiest one of all, relationships. In our case, I'm going to limit the discussion to platonic relationships amongst coworkers, but I think there are some universal truths found here as well. At Big Nerd Ranch, we've realized that routine check-ins or one-on-ones go a long way to surface small issues before they can become big issues. By asking, how are things going, or have you had any problems lately, a team leader or mentor can open dialogue that might get pushed aside otherwise. When we were a much smaller company, we had a weekly one-on-one check-in with our head of operations. This experiment was called Things That Suck. Chris would ask us for anything that had sucked that week or had interfered with our productivity or happiness, come up with a list, email them to us, and make some suggestions on how to fix things. So a lot of processes were tweaked and a lot of nuisances were removed along the way. I remember one week Chris asked me, so what sucked this week? And I couldn't think of anything. It had been a really good week. But he said I had to give him something. So I said, well, someone adjusted my chair, and when I got back to the office, it took me a really long time to get it back the way I like it. So he wrote that down. Shortly after, an email edict went out. If someone has their name on a chair, you can sit in it if it's empty, but don't adjust it. This removed friction for a lot of people coming into the office. And since we're remote friendly, knowing that you have a familiar space that you can work more, it would allow you to move seamlessly from one workspace to another, even if you hadn't been there for a few weeks or a few months. So the chair edict is still a rule, and most people follow it. But approaching your head of operations and saying, hey, someone adjusted my chair, it took me forever to fix it, and it sucked, might not feel like the most professional approach, probably because it is not. The squeaky wheel adage is much more comfortable in conversation than in practice. But when management and any sort of leadership role really asks you what can be improved in your daily working life, it feels okay to talk about these small things. And it fosters communication instead of assuming that the status quo is fine. But of course, there is a caveat. In order for the head of operations or manager of a team to get real, honest answers to the question, is anything wrong, there has to be trust. Otherwise, this open dialogue is frozen shut. You need trust to give feedback, and you need feedback to solve conflicts and issues. Maintaining a short feedback cycle internally is just as valuable as maintaining a short feedback cycle between developers and product owners. However, trust among coworkers is not a byproduct of managerial training. Choosing the most technically strong developer to lead a team might not be choosing the best team leader. Managers or team leaders need empathy and emotional intelligence. For open communication to be effective, this empathy and emotional intelligence must exist all the way up the chain of command. The way a company grows and handles layers of responsibility will shape what type of communication and feedback cycle can exist. The chain of communication is only as strong as its weakest link, and a good idea or important criticism will fall off the radar and be unheard if one of the link fails. Selecting good, empathetic, thoughtful managers, leaders, and mentors, and giving them the tools and resources to succeed will fortify this chain of communication. So while managerial training should and can teach people in leadership positions how to handle difficult situations and help provide awareness to non-obvious concerns, trust itself still takes time to build. And accounting for this time gap requires processes to encourage and speed up the building of trust in the meantime. At ThoughtWorks, they know that some conversations are difficult to have with your colleagues. For these instances, they encourage having mentors or coaches present to help guide these crucial conversations. This creates a safe environment for all parties so that ideas can be shared openly. And in time, trust is built amongst everyone involved in these conversations. The company Pluralsight maintains culture coaches to help dive into company issues and shine a light on any hidden issues. On their culture blog, highly recommended, Keith Sparkjoy, their CTO, writes, "No matter how much we take the focus off of people, no matter how many of us learn to stop being judgmental, people are still going to hesitate to talk about the tough stuff." They, like ThoughtWorks, Attempt to open this dialogue by having a culture coach available to help address the tough stuff. And by employing the 5 whys system, light is cast on hidden issues, and culture coaches can begin to make recommendations for solutions. If you're unfamiliar with the 5 whys system, it's an approach to surface cause and effect by continuing to ask why until the root cause of an issue is surfaced. A quick example. The car won't start. Why? The battery is dead. Why? The alternator isn't working. Why? The alternator belt wasn't replaced. Why? The car isn't being maintained well. Oh. Pluralsight's culture coaches don't have the authority to take direct action after identifying problems, but instead have a direct line to top leadership at Pluralsight. They have a process in place to keep each chain link connected. To prevent and mitigate HR headaches and coworker relationship problems, processes must be clearly defined, established, and followed. To assume that people will behave like adults leaves a company vulnerable, and unnoticed small issues can snowball into big problems. But these processes are only as good as the people implementing them. To have a culture of open dialogue and feedback, a company requires more than just trust building processes and time. It requires hiring trustworthy people. From my earlier question, what 3 things makes a good project, I got a second response from Patrick Van Stee of Assembly Made. He said, good people, good people, good people. If we revisit Acme Code number 7's job listing, part of their description addresses this. What we value, we don't care about ninjas or rock stars. We look for people who are really smart, really nice, and who want to solve big problems. So hopefully you recall that the rest of their description really nails what a company culture should aim to be. But even if they just specified looking for smart, nice people, they'd be ahead of the game. We share a similar goal at Big Nerd Ranch when we are looking to hire someone. What we look for is someone being brilliant, hardworking, and kind. And it's all too easy for brilliance and hard work to be the 2 most valued elements in a worker. Businesses need both to make money, but valuing kindness takes extra effort. We attempt to highlight kindness in 2 ways, by offering the Big Nerd of the Month and Big Nerd of the Moment awards. The monthly award is selected from a pool of nominees, but the Big Nerd of the Moment can be given at any time to anyone for anything. Bring in donuts to the office. Big Nerd of the Moment. Help a teammate track down a pesky HTML bug. Big Nerd of the Moment. Share a ridiculously cute picture in the company chat room that makes someone's day. You get the idea. By bringing attention to and praising the values we appreciate, we deliberately shape the culture of our company. Passively combining good people and fun perks in the same place and assuming that it will yield awesome company culture leaves vulnerabilities exposed. Good company culture doesn't just happen. It takes work and refinement, just like any business process. And in pursuing a well-crafted, deliberate company culture, you might find a better model than the PERMA model of happiness to emulate. But by having multiple people within your company talking about and working towards a culture that is conducive to a fulfilling professional life, you'll be making strides to that awesome company culture we all hear about. So awesome company culture can happen. It might take time, and it might require some unexpected changes, but everyone can benefit from the refinement process, especially when everyone is involved in making it happen. So make it happen. Thank you. Again, I'm Pamela Vickers. I work at Big Nerd Ranch. We are a consulting and training company based in Atlanta. I organize or co-organize a monthly meetup called Rails Girls, where we help foster a community of women who are either learning or continuing to learn Rails. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay.
Was the company culture something that was, kind of from the beginning as a startup, or was it something that at some point people realized you needed to be paying attention to?
I think there was kind of I think it was a byproduct of like the developer god that kind of came out of startup culture. I think, you know, it became an easy thing to sweeten an offer, where if all the companies can offer you a lot of money, what are the other things they can offer? So I think it came from a place of being competitive, and I think some companies really did have an organic company culture that was great. But I think the tech industry is pretty bad about emulating parts of startup culture without understanding where they came from. So I think it probably does kind of come from that, but I think altogether we're kind of a competitive industry where we compete for talent. So I think anything you can say good about yourself or list on a bullet point for a job listing to make you stand out, I think we do that, whether or not we've really thought about what company culture means at that company. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I also meant specifically at Big Nerd Ranch.
Oh, at Big Nerd Ranch? Okay, can you ask it again and let me answer it for Big Nerd Ranch?
When the company was founded, was
Yes.
it founded with culture first, or was it something that at some point, like, people just said, hey, you know, we should be paying more attention?
So we have an interesting history. Big Nerd Ranch merged with another company called High Groove Studios about 2 years ago. And High Groove Studios was about 30 people, and Big Nerd Ranch was about 80, I think, when we merged, maybe less than that. So both companies were on the smaller side, and then when we merged, we were suddenly like a medium-sized company. So we really had to figure out who we were again. It was we each had different cultures that were similar, but it's like moving into the same house. You have to figure out. So for the last 2 years, it has been a very kind of dedicated, deliberate attempt to figure out who we are as a company. Since we grew so big, we didn't get to scale our cultures. We had to create a new one. So hopefully that answers your question better. Okay. I see one back here.
Kind of go off of that, how does maintaining a good culture scale? Or how do you scale as you add more and more people to?
That's a really good question, and I don't know if I have a good answer, but I would hope that by having people talking about it and thinking about it and having any sort of process in place, issues that come up will be addressed. And I think as you grow, you'll have different issues. But as long as there's a good, defined path of communication, or as long as you have at least one person you know you can go to, and they know someone they can go to, I think the issues you're going to encounter are just going to be human issues. So if you have a bigger company, you're going to have more humans. So I think as long as you pay attention to the human nature of a big company, it can scale, but you have to be even more mindful, because with more people, there's more likely there's someone's voice not getting heard. So I think you do have to work harder to make sure that everyone's voice can be carried through some sort of chain. And I saw a question.
It was about scalability.
Oh, okay. And then.
What sort of boundaries do they put on one-on-ones to keep it from resorting to an complaining session?
It's kind of been, so there are different teams. I work on the back-end team, which is the Rails team, and then there's an iOS team, an Android team. So for us, we kind of let each team kind of figure out their own things. And I think some people need a complaining session. They just need to get it out, and their team leader may be the poor soul that has to hear it. But I think keeping something to yourself that's bothering you about where you work doesn't make you love where you work anymore. So I think it's when you have a good team leader or mentor, it doesn't even have to be an official role. Like we were flat for a very long time, and sort of like leaders and mentors would just kind of pop up just naturally because they had been there longer, so people were comfortable going to them to ask them questions. So I think as long as you have people that are good leaders, whether they're getting paid to do it or not, it kind of, the boundaries are set by them. So if they have a good understanding of how to talk to you, then you have a productive conversation. But if they are also wanting to complain and you want to complain, you just get together and complain, that's probably a less productive one-on-one.
Okay, thanks.
Yes?
What measures do you take to resolve and enhance diversity for that, given, thinking especially when culture was part of hiring decisions, that's something that's been well documented to have a negative impact on what do you do to counteract?
Well, I have to admit, I think we were guilty of it at one point. We used to have a part of the interview that we called culture checks because we thought we were so ahead of it. Like, man, if we hire someone who's a bad cultural fit, it's just not going to work at all. And the bigger you get, it's not practical to do that. And we did start to realize that if you hire someone that you just would hang out with, then you just end up with like this, you know, it's like a clubhouse. So you don't have the diversity element there. So one of the things that we've done is we've tried to have good conversations and brought in whoever wanted to, like we'd go to lunch and anybody that was interested in diversity, whatever that meant, we could just go and talk. And the conversations would always take different forms because it means something different to different people. But I think kind of like what I said about company culture, the more people you have caring and worrying and like refining your company culture, in the same way with diversity, the more people you have thinking about it, talking about it, the better you can hire without just hiring someone because like, oh, well, he rides bikes and I ride bikes, so we'll probably get along pretty well. I think it's just about making sure that anyone who has a voice or an opinion about the topic can be heard because they might have a viewpoint that you don't have because you don't have the same life experiences. So it's, again, just trying to like pull from people who might not as easily share their opinion as others and making sure that the quiet voices have just as much value as the louder ones. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay.
Do you have any insight on creating a company culture that works across the company for the technical staff and the non-technical staff so that everyone sort of feels like it is our company culture and it's not just the geeks company culture?
I think that's a tough one too because a lot of the company culture things that have been brought in are from that startup culture attempt of like make the developer as comfortable as possible so the developer just can be productive. And, you know, if the marketing manager happens to like do dishes, well, you know, at least that's not time taken away from writing code. And I think that's a tough one. And I think that is something that has to kind of come. So some company culture can go from the bottom up in terms of, you know, the day-to-day workers up to leadership. I think some of that is the tone set by leadership, where if leadership makes it very clear that everyone's work is valued, then I think the culture that will spawn from that will be a much more coherent culture instead of like, well, this is what, you know, the non-technical people, when they have a company event, that's what they do, and this is what the developers do. I think also having, so I didn't mention this, but one thing that I know Big Nerd Ranch does is we have what's essentially a check-in with the company, where leadership has like kind of a what we call a fireside chat, but it's a time for everyone to get in the same room and kind of hear what everyone else is doing. And I think that that can be very valuable. It can get a little long sometimes, but I think hearing the hard work that other people are doing and again, kind of drawing attention to it and valuing it just as a group will kind of, again, create a culture that you are all sharing instead of just like what you're doing over here in this part of the office and what you're doing over here in this part of the office. Okay.
I wanted to ask, there's been a lot of focus here at the conference about you know, male versus female and making sure that you've got inclusion for women. But I don't know if there's been as much talk about generational differences. But you know, you can find that company culture tends to skew more toward the interest of younger people. And how do you get it to be inclusive for an older generation?
I think, again, if you take away some of the, like, so what defines the company culture? Is it that there's a beer event after work that people who don't have kids to get home to can go to? I think if you take away the things that are extra and look more at, do you have a good idea of if you are stuck in the middle of a bad project or you don't have the resources you need, making sure that you know who to talk to. I think if you start shining the focus inward instead of like the peripherals, then I think some of the generational things become less of an issue because most people, to do their work, they need the resources, they need the time, they need the support. And I don't think that that really is going to be different based on gender or generation. But I do think that making decisions about the sort of events that you have as a company and the sort of, perks or benefits, and aiming for so one thing that happened that I remember was there was like a random, quote unquote, random sampling of questions that we were making a decision about bringing on a new perk. And the thing is, when you are a tech company, a random sampling is probably a white single male in his 20s or early 30s. So it was random, but it was the same voice almost. Not that everyone is the same, so I'm sorry for a sweeping generalization. But if you're trying to get a sampling of voices and it's random, you're gonna not get the voices you need. So I think making a very deliberate decisions about who you ask can help with that as well. So random doesn't work so well when most of the people are kind of the same, and then there's this little group where just like totally different, you have different backgrounds altogether. So trying to make sure everyone's voice is heard, even if there's a huge group that's kind of the same, and this group where they're not the same. The only thing that they're the same is that they're not just like this group. So, I think that is a tough one though, because it's easy to make a decision that will make most of the company happy, but it's hard to make a decision that will make all of the company happy. Okay, I saw this hand first.
I'm curious as to how much of your workforce is virtual, and for those, do you do something different to try and make sure they get into the culture?
It is hard. We do have a lot of remote workers, and it is hard. We try to make sure all meetings are remote. We've even had hangout pizza parties where anyone who wanted to hang out ordered their own pizza, and we tried to have them delivered at the same time, and we like put the laptop in the middle of the table and we were all standing around eating. It was funny. But so it kind of depends on what the event is. If it's a Christmas party, it's hard to unless you have one of those little Segway robots with the iPad, it's hard to bring in remote workers that way. But having things like company chat rooms, like whether it's Campfire or HipChat, that sort of thing, just where there's continual contact, not just emails or not just a conversation when there's something specific you need, that does go a long way. But if you're physically removed, you're physically removed. But there are things you can do as long as other people that are in the same office space are trying to bring them in. You can have your own pizza party. So we try. Yes.
So you mentioned engagement, and I was wondering if you had any tips for companies where, for example, half of the company might consider themselves part of hacker culture and really value that hacker culture within themselves, but the other half of the company is interested in the enterprise and making money and marketing, and it's a very different language that they both speak. How do you bring them together into the same company?
So is the question, how do you help provide engaging work when maybe the workforce has different ideas of what engaging actually is? If you just have one project and you have two different types of developers, there's probably going to be one group that likes it better than the other. And if you just have one project, that's probably just the way it's going to be. So either the people who are unhappy might need to find a product that they like better to work on, or if there can be more fluidity about, well, I liked working on a higher level of the code base, and they like working on the driver level. If you can be in a position where you can have these conversations and maybe eventually kind of float to whatever part of the code base you enjoy the most, then that's kind of the best answer I think I have. So my first job, I worked on set-top boxes. So you really could get really, really low level, where you're looking at the hardware, is that pin actually working or not? And then there's high level where there's graphical things where you're dealing with why is that so pixelated? So there were people who kind of gravitated towards different parts of the code base, even though at any point in time you might touch a different part because it might be, you think it's here and the problem's actually here. So I think as long as you are in a place where people care that you enjoy the work that you do, then you might be able to kind of gravitate to the part that you enjoy the most. Do you have another question?
I guess I was thinking more along the lines of when your company scales up and you're kind of speaking at it more the startup level, I think. And I guess I was wondering more how do you include company cultures where the backgrounds of each group is very different, the goals of each group is very different, and culture is the things that don't necessarily make money in the industry. It may not be practical to spend 10 hours on this thing, but we love this thing. Whereas the business side is saying, hey, we can't spend money doing this. We need to do this thing that's making money. So I mean, I don't. I guess my question would be more along the lines of like, how do you share those cultures that are so different based on engagement? Like,
some of it's just going to take time, I think, and there has to be desire on either side to share a culture. I think sometimes dev culture can be a little combative, where it's like, well, you don't get what we do, so why? And, it's like you've got that like, well, I wasn't the cool kid, but now I'm like the powerhouse writing code, so I'm pretty cool, I think. So I think sometimes you do have an issue where you have cultures that don't want to get along, but I think as long as both sides are interested in combining cultures, then there can be progress. But if it's so very different where there's no way to even communicate with each other, I don't know. But I think as long as there's desire on both sides, or it doesn't have to just be two sides, as long as all parts of the company want to function together, I think they can. They just have to do the work. There's no easy way. They just have to do the work and get to know each other and figure out how they can get along and create a culture together. All right, I think there was one other hand at one point, but I don't see it anymore. All right.